we are talking about a fluid flowing through a parabolic trough type of collector. So a parabolic trough, parabolic reflector with 3-meter width and 50-meter length is to be used. Now in this case, it is shown for pressurized water, right? And in the example, yeah. So in this example, it is for water. And another example is done for properties of thermic fluid, right? So properties of thermic fluid are properties of oil. So we are going to, like in this class, we are going to solve it for the thermic fluid, and the data for the water will be given to you, and you can solve it as assignment or homework. So the length and width of a parabolic trough type of collector are 4 meter and 100 meter respectively. So width is 4 meters and length is 100 meters. Diameter of the absorber tube is 25 millimeters. Thermic fluid enter at 134 and exits at 160. Beam radiation is beam radiation or beam radiation intensity or solar irradiance is 800 watt per meter square, and efficiency of the collector is 55%. So first thing to be found is the flow rate of thermic fluid. I think we had done it up to this point. And then the surface temperature of the absorber tube is also to be found. Right? There could be different reasons why you want to know the surface temperature of absorber tube. One of the important reasons from thermal point of view is that the losses from the collector are dependent uh, on the temperature of the absorber tube. Temperature of the absorber tube or absorber tube surface temperature. Higher the temperature, more the losses. So one might be interested in lower absorber temperature. So this could be one of the reasons why one is interested in the absorber tube temperature, surface temperature. So thermic fluid temperature which is passing through the tube is given, but that temperature is not same as the absorber tube surface temperature. And here we are going to again assume that it's a very thin tube. So we are not going to make any distinction between the temperature of the outside surface and inside surface. So surface temperature is one and the same, whether you call it inside surface temperature of the tube or outside surface temperature of the tube. So one thing is the temperature of the thermic fluid or oil which is flowing through the tube, and surface temperature and the ambient temperature. So these are the three temperatures which may be of interest in this problem. Okay, so before going back to this problem, I thought it might be a good idea to show you a video on parabolic trough type of collector, though this image or picture has been shown to you, and this should be like more or less making the idea of this type of collector clear in your mind. Uh, okay, so what is being done is there is a there is one circuit which is the thermic fluid or oil circuit, and it is the oil is being circulated through these parabolas. Now, though they seem to be in parallel in this diagram, in our problem they are not in parallel. They are put in series for flow of oil, and then it collects the heat from these collectors, and there is a heat exchanger, and there may be the Rankine cycle which may be run here, right? So we are trying to address this type of problem. Okay, so you can watch this video, a short video, and that might help you to get a better idea about the parabolic trough type of collectors. I think I will stop sharing and start sharing again, because I will have to include the system audio. Okay.
Okay, take the natural heat from the sun, reflect it against a mirror, focus all of that heat on one area, send it through a power system, and you've got a renewable way of making electricity. It's called concentrating solar power, or CSP. Now, there are many types of CSP technologies: towers, dishes, linear mirrors, and troughs. Okay, have a look at this parabolic trough system. Parabolic troughs are large mirrors shaped like a giant U. These troughs are connected together in long lines and will track the sun throughout the day. When the sun's heat is reflected off the mirror, the curved shape sends most of that reflected heat onto a receiver. The receiver tube is filled with a fluid. It could be oil, molten salt, something that holds the heat well. Basically, this super hot liquid heats water in this thing called a heat exchanger, and the water turns to steam. Now the steam is sent off to a turbine, and from there, it's business as usual inside a power plant. A steam turbine spins a generator, and the generator makes electricity. Once the fluid transfers its heat, it's recycled and used over and over. And the steam is also cooled, condensed, and recycled again and again. One big advantage of these trough systems is that the heated fluid can be stored and used later to keep making electricity when the sun isn't shining. Sunny skies and hot temperatures make the Southwest U.S. an ideal place for these kinds of power plants. Many concentrated solar power plants could be built within the next several years. And a single plant can generate 250 megawatts or more, which is enough to power about 90,000 homes. That's a lot of electricity to meet America's power needs.
So I think this made the idea of the parabolic trough type of collector for using the solar radiation.
It's important for Sunshot to focus on storage because that's the long-term lever that we have available.
So you could see the troughs, the parabolic trough, which work as reflectors, right? They are like mirrors because they reflect, but they need not be made up of glass. They are generally made up of aluminium sheets, which are highly polished for good reflectivity. And they focus it on the, you could also see the receiver tube through which either the oil or water may be passed. Let's say in this case, we are talking about passing the oil through this tube. And the solar radiation is focused on the on this tube, and the fluid temperature increases, the thermic fluid temperature increases, and it's in a closed circuit, and there is a heat exchanger here. So because you want to run this Rankine cycle using water, you are like using indirect heat exchange. You are using a heat exchanger, and here you are raising steam in the heat exchanger and using it in turbine and running a generator, and then the other components of the steam power plant like the condenser and pump are there. Okay. So the thermic fluid temperatures, as it is shown here, is of course they are not very high as taken here. It's it enters at 134 and comes out at 160, right? So width of the trough and length of the trough. So you could see those parabolic troughs were really very big in size. Of course, here we are not taken a very big size. Width is 4 meters and the total length is 100 meters. And then the receiver tube diameter is 25.4 millimeters, and the fluid inlet temperature, this thermic fluid inlet temperature is 134 degrees Celsius, and the outlet temperature is 160. So the average of those two and I have taken just added 10 Kelvin in that, so that gives me 430 Kelvin. Okay, you can refer to the appendix I had already sent you the file, and you can refer to the properties of thermic fluid there. So you can refer to this temperature. I'm not sure whether it is given in Kelvin there or in degrees Celsius there, but it's 430 Kelvin. If it is given in degrees Celsius, you can convert it accordingly. Now you may ask why I have added 10 Kelvin. So this is because the thermic fluid, this is the average temperature of thermic fluid, but the surface temperature will be a bit higher than the temperature of the thermic fluid. That's why I have added 10. But it's in a way, it's arbitrary way of adding this number. Even if you don't add it, there is nothing wrong in that. So you may just take it as the average temperature of the thermic fluid, and you may find the properties of the thermic fluid at that temperature. And the beam radiation is 800 watt per meter square. So per meter square of the aperture area, right? Aperture area is nothing but the width into length. Okay, you don't have to consider the surface area because the solar radiation can enter through that rectangle. The area through which the solar radiation enters is the aperture area, and the efficiency is 55%. So this is the total aperture area, 400 meters square in this case. And so how much heat is coming in? So heat coming in is area of the parabolic trough, the aperture area, multiplied by the solar radiation intensity, the beam radiation intensity, 800 watt per meter square. So 800 watt per meter square into 400 meters square gives you this total heat which is falling on the parabolic trough type of collector. So that's 320 kilowatt in total. Now out of that, how much is going to be utilized, or how much will actually go to the thermic fluid? It's equal to the efficiency into the incidence energy. So that's 176 kilowatt, right? You are multiplying this 55% or 0.55 with this 320. So that makes it 176 kilowatt. Then what is the area of the receiver tube or absorber tube? It is pi d. D is the diameter of the receiver tube or absorber tube, and length is 100 meters again, and this was 25.4 millimeters. So the area of the absorber tube is 7.98 meters square, which is much smaller than this 400 meters square. Okay, so actually the main purpose of using concentrating type of collector, as it was like the name which is commonly used in this area, is CSP, concentrating solar power. So why do you use concentrating solar power? Because like the absorber area would be much less than the area of the reflector or the aperture area. So because of that, the area through which the heat is lost is less. So this is advisable for higher temperatures, for high temperature applications. So here, how much is the flux which is falling on the tube? So the total heat that is, or this is the heat, the flux which is received by the thermic fluid. So this is the 176 kilowatt which is going into the thermic fluid, and how much is the area of the absorber tube. So you get the heat flux, right? And we are going to assume that this heat flux is constant, so that in case if it comes out to be a laminar flow, you can use the constant heat flux boundary condition. But if it is turbulent flow, we have to use the correlation for turbulent flow. And now you have to refer the properties of the thermic fluid from the table. So I have picked up those values from the table as it is written here. Properties of thermic fluid are taken as properties of unused engine oil in Cropera and David appendix. So this is the CP 2.471 specific heat kilojoule per kg Kelvin, and how much mass flow rate of the thermic fluid would be required. So this is the total heat that is going into the fluid, and Cp into temperature change is also given. So that is 160 minus 134. So you need how much mass flow rate of the oil you need? you need 2.739 kg per second. That's the mass flow rate. Now we want to find out or we want to do the heat transfer analysis. So for that we would need different numbers. Because we are interested in finding the heat transfer coefficient, that only will give you the surface temperature of the tube. So Nusselt number would be required. To get the Nusselt number, you need to know the Reynolds number and perhaps also the Prandtl number. So let us do that exercise. So to get the Reynolds number, you need the velocity. So first thing done is to find the volume flow rate. So this mass flow rate is converted to volume flow rate by dividing it by the density of this thermic fluid, which is again taken from the table, and it is 806.5 kg per meter cube. So that is put here, and the volume flow rate comes out to be 3.397 into 10 raised to minus 3 meter cube per second. And I want velocity, so I have found out the cross-sectional area of the absorber tube. Absorber tube is just 0.0254 meters. So pi by 4 d square is the cross-sectional area. So that is found, and the volume flow rate is divided by the cross-sectional area to get the velocity. So the velocity comes out to be 6.704 meter per second, and yeah, so you can keep your notebooks and calculators with you, and while I am speaking, I think you should be able to find the numbers on your own also. Refer the required values from the table, take those values, and I hope they match, like what you see in the table and what is given here should match. In case there is a little discrepancy, you can use the value that you get from table, but I don't think there is much there should be much discrepancy or difference. So in that case, your answer should be very close to the numbers that I am showing. So the velocity 6.704 meters per second, and again you take the value like dynamic viscosity from the table, which is coming out to be 0.0047 Pascal second, right, or kg per meter second. If it is given in micropascal second in the table, whatever number is given, you can multiply it with 10 raised to minus 6, and that should give you this number. What you find is that this viscosity is somewhat higher than what you get from, or much higher than what you get from for water, right? So the oil is more viscous, so obviously the viscosity is higher, though the temperature is also a bit high already. And the thermal conductivity of the fluid 0.132 watt per meter Kelvin. And find the Prandtl number. So Prandtl number comes out to be that is mu Cp by K, so that comes out to be around 88. Right, so you can see the Prandtl number value is also much higher than what you get from water. For water, I think you got in somewhere in the range of 4 to 10, right? So here it is much higher. So when Prandtl number is higher, actually one should also, in case you get the laminar flow, you should also check for the developing length or entry length. But hopefully that might not happen. If the flow is turbulent, then you need not worry much about the entry length. So you can find out the Reynolds number, and Reynolds number is rho Vd upon mu. So as I have calculated, the Reynolds number is 29,217 or 218. That's the value of Reynolds number. Okay. Now your Reynolds number is much higher than 10,000, right? Even like above 2,300, it is generally considered to be there is transition from the laminar flow to turbulent flow. And at 10,000, you don't have any doubt, and the flow is fully turbulent. So this is even higher than 10,000. So the flow is turbulent. So which correlation can you use for the turbulent flow? So even this, I suppose, was discussed earlier. So one of the very common or like popular correlation for turbulent flow, fully developed turbulent flow. Now, as I told, when the flow is turbulent, we generally don't need to worry about the entry length, because beyond 10 times the diameter, you generally consider it to be like fully developed. So here the diameter is just 25 millimeters, so 25 centimeters is the entry length, and you are talking about a 100-meter long tube. So the flow is certainly almost for the whole length, it is fully developed flow. So you can use this Dittes-Boelter correlation. So Nusselt number is 0.023, Reynolds number raised to 4 by 5, Prandtl number raised to n. Now this n is 0.4 is the fluid if the fluid is being heated, and 0.3 if the fluid is being cooled. Obviously, in this case, the fluid is being heated because the solar radiation is falling on the observer tube. It gets converted into heat, and your fluid is flowing through the tube, and the tube surface is at high temperature, so it is giving heat to the fluid. So in this case, Prandtl number, the exponent of Prandtl number would be 0.4. Okay, so this is the correlation which we are using. Of course, there are other correlations also, and when you use a correlation, you should be sure that you are falling in the criteria given for the given fluid. So here the Prandtl number should be in the range of 0.6 to 160. So our Prandtl number was somewhere around 90, so it falls into this. And Reynolds number is greater than 10,000, as you can see, right? So and L by D is greater than 10. So obviously we satisfy all these conditions. There are other correlations also, and in some cases, particularly when the like when your Reynolds number is not very high, here it is given that it should be more than 10,000. If it is like say somewhere between 2,300 and 10,000, in case you are interested in quick calculation, and if you find this formula to be simple, you may still use the Dittes-Boelter correlation, but then the result that you get, you can't expect it to be very accurate. So it's like told here that errors as large as 25% may result from their use. Okay, and there are certain like this is a quite old Dittes-Boelter correlation, is one of the pioneer or like pioneer equation or a correlation that was given, but later on there were more correlations given, and they are claimed to be more accurate, like one by Nilinsky. So here the friction coefficient, Moody's friction factor, is used, and finding, like you may find it by this F by Petucho correlation. So this is for the smooth tube, and you may put that F here, and this would be more accurate, and it is claimed to be around 10% accurate. So whatever number you get, you can expect that the actual number would be plus or minus 10% if you use the correlation. So there are other correlations also available, and some of them may be specifically targeted for a particular case. For example, this one, okay, this Skupinski. So this one is particularly for low Prandtl numbers, as you can see. So for liquid metals, it should be more useful. Okay, now we are focusing on this example. So you are satisfying all required condition for the Dittes-Boelter correlation. So you can use that correlation and find out the value of Nusselt number. So I think you are equipped to do this calculation. So tell me, what is the Nusselt number that you are getting in this case? And let us see whether that matches with mine. So you may type your answer. Yeah, so Sairaj and Jaideep, Jainil, both of them are somewhere near 515. Okay, so let's check whether it's close to that or not. So it is around this one, the Nusselt number is around 515, and now you can calculate the heat transfer coefficient. Okay, you can calculate the heat transfer coefficient, which is NuK by D, right? K is the thermal conductivity of the thermic fluid and D is the diameter of the absorber tube. So with that, you get the Nusselt number around 2678, right? So this is a good number, right? Not very low. A few thousand is good. Like, I'm not saying very good or excellent heat transfer coefficient, but the thermic fluid is used, and air, as it was told earlier, is one of the worst heat transfer media. Oil is also not very good, but still you are getting it in like a couple of thousand to 3,000. So not very bad. Particularly, I think because the velocity is high, you are getting good heat transfer coefficient. So this is not very low. So it's not much of a worry, right? So let us go further. Why you found this heat transfer coefficient? Because you want to find out the surface temperature. And how do you get the surface temperature with this heat transfer coefficient? Heat flux Qs double prime is equal to H into delta T. So what is this delta T? This delta T is Ts minus Ti in this case, you can say, right? So the surface temperature at entry and exit would be, now recall the temperature variation of when for constant heat flux, right? What is the nature? The nature was that in developing flow, there is, like, the mean temperature is continuously changing and it is linear throughout the length of the tube, and the surface temperature is closer to mean temperature initially, but then it runs parallel to that. Right now, like, this is almost fully in the whole tube is in the fully developed region, so you can expect, or you can say that the temperature difference between the fluid and the surface is going to remain constant. So heat flux is equal to the temperature difference between the mean fluid temperature and the surface temperature. Here surface temperature is higher, so you can, to keep it positive, you can write surface temperature minus mean temperature. But it is different at entry and different at exit, right? Or you can say it is Qs double prime is equal to T is equal to H into delta T. So you find out delta T. Okay, heat flux is same everywhere. How much is the heat flux? We had found it here, right? This is the heat flux, 22.056 kilowatt per meter square. This is the heat flux on the absorber tube. Now you are on the absorber tube. You are not talking about the reflector surfaces. So this Qs, the surface heat flux, is equal to H into delta T. So you can find out delta T and tell me how much delta T you get. Yeah, so it's 8.23. I had found is directly the number, right? That is the surface temperature at the inlet and surface temperature at the outlet. So this delta T is 8.237, right? So the answer given here is correct, right? So Sairaj and Abhay, right? Your answers are correct. Good. So at the inlet, your inlet fluid temperature was how much? 134, right? But how much will be the surface temperature? So you add this 8.237. So the surface temperature is 142.2. And at the exit, your fluid temperature is 160. You add this excess temperature, right? So at the surface, the temperature is 168.2. So this delta T is actually not very high, around 8 degrees. It's not very high because the heat transfer coefficient was good. If the heat transfer coefficient is poor, right, you can understand that if H is low, then obviously this value will be high and your surface temperature will be high, right? So higher the surface temperature, more the heat loss from that temperature, and your collector efficiency would be actually low. Of course, here it was directly given. Okay, so this again is one more example which demonstrated the how heat transfer knowledge can be used to estimate certain thermal parameters and put into practical applications. Okay, so this brings us to the end of this example, and I want to take one more example, and it's given here. So now we are talking about a non-circular geometry, So there are 2-3 new thing. Of course, it may not be completely new, but we may not have used it earlier that I want to introduce here. One thing is about this non-circular geometry and the concept of hydraulic diameter. You learn this hydraulic diameter also in fluid mechanics. The same concept is applicable here also, and so hydraulic diameter and also the concept of the electrical analogy to solve the problems of heat transfer, right? Again, this is also used in conduction and the concept is the same, so that is also going to be used here. So sometimes you are talking about internal flow. Now in all cases of internal flow, it need not always be circular geometry, right? You may come across other types of geometry also. So in that case, what is the value of Nusselt number? So if it is a non-circular geometry, you can use in place of diameter that you use for in definition of Reynolds number, and while evaluating the H value, that is heat transfer coefficient from Nusselt number, the hydraulic diameter should be used in place of the regular diameter in case of circular tube. So hydraulic diameter is nothing but 4 times the cross-sectional area upon the wetted perimeter, right? Which perimeter? Wetted perimeter. So that may be used, and this is reasonably good for turbulent flows. If it is laminar flow, then it may not be a good idea to use the circular tube numbers, that is that 3.66 and 4.36. For circular, it is these are the two Nusselt numbers that you use for two different boundary conditions, that is constant heat flux and constant surface temperature. But in case of laminar flow, for other types of geometry, the value of Nusselt number are given in this table. So for those geometries, these are the Nusselt numbers that you will use even after calculating the hydraulic diameter. You don't use 4.36 and 3.66, but depending upon this like width to height ratio, you pick up the right value of Nusselt number. Okay. So we are going to take this example now for a non-circular geometry. So there is a hot air which is supplied at a rate of 400 meter cube per hour into a duct with width and height 150 and 100, right? So A is 150 and B is 100. The duct passes through a corridor of a building where temperature is 0 degrees Celsius. So this may be considered to be a heating application. Like in cold regions, the the temperature, ambient temperature may drop to a very low value. So you want to provide or supply heated air into different areas, occupied areas. So you are using this duct for for supplying the air into those areas. Now it may be a long duct, but at length equal to 7 meter, the air temperature is measured to be, let's say, 60 degrees Celsius. Now at this point, what will be the surface temperature of the duct, right? Now the surface temperature of the duct actually will depend upon let us talk about this electrical analogy. So what is happening is the air inside here is at a higher temperature, right? So that is shown as TML, the mean temperature at length L. Okay, and then the surface temperature actually is taken as a single temperature. Again, a duct is generally very thin metal duct, so you are not differentiating between inner surface temperature and outer surface temperature. So you're just giving a single number, the surface temperature. So there is a boundary layer of the fluid on the inner surface, and because of that there is some resistance offered. Now because we have taken like inside area and outside area same, you can write this 1 upon H or 1 upon HA as the resistance, thermal resistance. So this is the fluid temperature, TML, air temperature, TS is the surface temperature, and this TS is less than TML because of the resistance offered by the inner surface boundary layer. And then this is the ambient temperature, T infinity, or means the notation that I've used is T suffix AMB, ambient. So that is even lower, and this is because of the heat transfer coefficient 1 upon resistance is inverse of the heat transfer coefficient into area. So 1 upon HO is the resistance offered. Okay, so that is the outside surface heat transfer coefficient, right? And that number is given to you. It is 7 watt per meter square. Now if it is like air is nearly stagnant, then the heat transfer coefficients would be low. So that is the reason why this HAO value is low. On the outer surface, the movement of air may not be much higher, so the heat transfer coefficient, this may even be natural convective heat transfer coefficient, which we will talk about later. And what will be the heat flux, right? It will be, heat flux is equivalent to current. Okay, if you compare it with the electrical circuit, so current is equal to potential difference divided by the resistance. So how much is the resistance? It is 1 upon this inner surface 1 upon inner surface heat transfer coefficient. You may put area also here, right? If you put area, then this will become not heat flux but the total heat transfer rate, right? So you may write it that way, or if you are writing it as a heat flux, you don't need to multiply area, which is common for both of this because the thickness is assumed to be 0. Okay, so this is the total temperature difference, right? This TML minus T alpha, and the two resistances offered. You have to make sum of that because they are in series. Okay. So this is also another concept which is comparatively a new thing which is being introduced here. So now let us get the required things for finding out the Reynolds number, because finally we want to get the heat transfer coefficient. So we do that. Okay. So find the volume flow rate is already given. Now this average temperature is calculated. So average temperature at this point is 60 and ambient is 0, so it's 30. Okay, 30 degrees Celsius, just written as 303 Kelvin. You need not write in Kelvin. It is 30 degrees Celsius. And then the mass flow rate would be this much. And now because we will have to use hydraulic diameter, you need to find out the perimeter. So the perimeter is calculated, which is coming out to be 0.5 meters. And the cross sectional area of the duct is the width into the height. It is coming out to be 0.015 meters square. Using that, you can find out the velocity of air, volume flow rate divided by the cross-sectional area. So you get the velocity of air. Hydraulic diameter is calculated 4 times the area into perimeter upon perimeter, wetted perimeter. So that is 0.12 meter. So that's the hydraulic diameter, and the other properties are picked up from the properties of air. So dynamic viscosity, Cp and K. Right now, using these values, find the Reynolds number for this case for air, the internal flow. So find the Reynolds number and check whether it is laminar flow or turbulent flow. If it is laminar flow, you may have to refer the paper, the table shown in the book, right? If it is turbulent flow, you need not worry much, and you can use the Dittes-Boelter correlation or such other relevant correlation, which is for circular tube, but it can still be reasonable to use them even for non-circular cross sections. So the density is perhaps not clearly shown here. You can get it from the table, or I can even display it here. The density is 1.164 kg per meter cube. So Reynolds number rho v d is hydraulic diameter, okay, upon mu. So you can use those parameters and get the Reynolds number and tell whether it is turbulent flow or it is laminar flow. Yeah, so Sagar is getting it 55534, and so is Sairaj, right? So it is turbulent flow. Okay, so let's see whether it is somewhere around 55,000. Yes, it is around 55,000. Okay, and then the Prandtl number is also to be found. So that is mu Cp by K, right? So Nusselt number now you can get with the Dittes-Boelter correlation. 0.023 Reynolds number is to into Prandtl number is to. Now in this case, whether the fluid is being heated or fluid is being cooled, it is hot air which is losing heat. So fluid is being cooled. So Prandtl number is to 0.3 is to be used. So the exponent of Prandtl number is 0.3. So you get the Nusselt number somewhere around 130, and you get the heat transfer coefficient at this cross section. So NUK by D. So that gives you the heat transfer coefficient, which is coming out to be around 28. Right. So you can see, even though the air is having moderate velocity, it is still giving you low heat transfer coefficient. It's just 28. Now outside it was 8, and here it is 28. Right. So what will be the overall, like the total, like 1 upon HXL and 1 upon HO? Those are the two resistances. You add the resistances, right, and then make inverse of that. Or you can write it like this: the overall heat transfer coefficient is like this: HXL into HAO upon HXL plus HAO, right? So what you find is that overall heat transfer coefficient is even less than the lower one. The lower one was 7 on the outer surface. So the overall is even less than that, right? This would always happen whenever there are multiple resistances in series. The overall resistance you get is even less than the lowest one, right? So making this very big is not going to help you, because the other one is much higher resistance. Okay, so this is the heat transfer coefficient you get. Now this QS is going to remain same, right? Whether you take the first resistance or you take second resistance or you take both of them put together. Okay, so what is done is, like, if this QS, you can evaluate this QS. It is nothing but U into TML minus TMB. This is the overall heat transfer coefficient and overall temperature difference. So that comes out to be 336. Now you can you want to get what? The surface temperature, but the heat flux is going to remain same. So what you do is, like, your delta T across the duct, right, would be QS upon HXL, right? What I am saying is, you are interested in this temperature, right, TS. So you consider only this part, right? And the current is still going to remain same. Heat flux is still going to remain same. So you can use the same heat flux, and the temperature difference between surface and the fluid is to be found. So only this resistance is required for that, right? So with that, you get this to be around 12 Kelvin. The temperature difference between the air and the duct, right? It is around 12 Kelvin. So basically, if the air is at 60, the surface temperature of the duct at that point is going to be around 48, right? So there is comparatively large temperature drop because the air is offering very high resistance. Okay. So this was another problem for non-circular geometry. So I think this brings us to the end of the chapter of internal flow, right? And we solved I think total 3 examples, and I can make a bit changes in the examples and give them as your assignment or homework.